Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. Here are your hosts, Bill Fraser and Tony Sartu.
Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. I'm Bill.
And I'm Tony.
And we are going to explore our love for music by sharing some facts and our thoughts on some of the best albums from the most recent Rolling Stone Top 500 album list.
All right. So, Bill, before we get to it, what episode are we on?
Tony, we're on episode 9, and it's just hard to believe that we're on episode 9.
I can't believe it. I really, I think we've been doing this now for about 3 months and
barely
did it on a whim. And here we are, episode 9. I think we decided that we were going to call season 1 10 episodes. Is that correct?
That is correct. We had originally had aspirations to call season 1 20 episodes, but we kind of have rethought it, and we're going to call season 1 10 episodes.
All right. So, with this landmark season coming to a close, our first season, I think you had a great idea for how we could commemorate the end of the season.
So, Tony, we're going to go out in a blaze of 80s glory with a mixtape battle. So, for anybody who didn't grow up in the 80s, the mixtape was a cassette, and you really could get music easily to snip playlists together like our modern lives. Right. So in modern life, you've got Spotify, or you've got Amazon Music, or you've got Apple Music, and you can easily put a playlist together and just choose the songs, choose the order, put them on random shuffle, listen to it whatever you want. Well, that didn't exist for Tony and I, and it didn't exist for any of us who grew up in the 80s. What we had was sitting and waiting for a song to be played on the radio and trying to catch that song and record it, and then splicing that together with the songs that you really wanted to listen to. If you got really exotic, maybe you had a turntable and a cassette deck connected to each other, and you would record something from your turntable onto your cassette deck and splice it together. But the mixtape was an art. And really what you would do is you put together a story with the songs that you wanted to listen to, and you title your mixtape, and you'd have a side 1 and a side 2, because just like albums, cassettes had side 1 and side 2. And what we're going to do at the end of season 1, at the end of our first 10 episodes, is Tony and I are going to make our own mixtapes of the songs that we chose over the course of the season from the 10 albums. So,
and guess what, folks? It's going to be a competition.
If you haven't learned anything, Tony and I love competing against each other. So we are going to each have to choose 10 songs. Each album has to be represented on the mixtape. And we need to tell a story with our mixtape, and we need to lay the mixtape out. Side 1, 5 songs. Side 2, 5 songs.
And also, wait, just one clarification. We have to be selecting from songs that we picked in the drafts.
Yes, that we have to actually choose from the songs that we selected over the course of the season. So we can only use songs that we had in our own drafts. So I can't use Let's Go Crazy because Tony had it in his draft. He can't use Purple Rain because I had it in mine. So that's an example of how things will play out. So we're going to try to tell a story with the 10 albums and create a unified mixtape to kind of wrap up season 1. We're really excited about this.
Totally. This is such a fun idea, at least fun for us. And we hope that you guys will think it's fun too. And of course, we're going to ask for you to vote on the best mixtape, and really just remember that it's not the best combination of songs. It's the best mixtape, which isn't the same thing. It's not the best list of songs. It's the best story that you're telling on that tape. So please keep that in mind when you vote, and definitely please also come up with your own mixtape ideas. We would love for you guys to send to us your own mixtapes from these 10 albums.
That would be awesome. So I'd love to hear what our listeners would put together mixtape wise and see how we stack up against them. So.
And, this isn't totally retro because our buddy Taylor Swift, it wouldn't be a show if I didn't mention Tay-Tay. She's trying to bring back the cassettes. All of her albums, she's releasing them also on cassette. So, of course, you have to pay like triple for the cassette of Red. But, cassettes are coming back just like vinyl has. Cassettes are back, and we want to be part of that with you guys.
No 8-tracks.
All right. So,
no 8-tracks, though, Tom.
No, I think that's where the line has been drawn.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
All right. So with that, today's album is Thriller by Michael Jackson. Thriller was released on November 30th of 1982. And on the Rolling Stone 2003 list, it was number 20. It stayed at number 20 for the 2012 list. And then in the most recent list in 2020, it jumped up to number 12. So, some basic sales information. Thriller is the best-selling album worldwide of all time. It sold over 70 million copies, and it's also the second best-selling album in the US, having sold 34 million copies. And do you know what the number one selling album of all time is?
I do. It's that Eagles Greatest Hit album, and it's that's a phenomenal album. And man, do the Eagles have their fans, because they sell albums like nobody's business.
So Thriller had 7 singles, all of which were top 10 singles as well. So Bill, would you tell us what was going on at the time in the world and in music?
Oh, I would love to start talking about 1982. 1982, we were 11 years old, Tony. So let's go back in our Wayback Machine with Sherman and Peabody, and Ronald Reagan was the president. And cost of living wise, you have gasoline at 91 cents a gallon, and the average price for a new car was under $8,000. I can't even fathom it.
I mean, just to put that into context, I was just at the baseball field, and one of the dads was showing me a used bat that his son wanted, a used baseball bat, $1,100.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So on the science and technology front, we had the Commodore 64 computer, first CD player from Sony. The first computer virus in 1982 was a floppy disk virus for the Apple II.
Nice.
Tron was the first feature film to use computer animation extensively. Dolby came out with surround sound for home. And Time Magazine, with all of this proliferation in the realm of computers, named the computer the person of the year in 1982. You also got a few things in science. You've got the first artificial heart, and you've got the first genetically engineered product, human insulin, being produced, which is really pretty cool. In movies and TV, a lot going on. So movies, you've got E.T., Tootsie, Officer and a Gentleman, Chariots of Fire, and Blade Runner. You've got Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Tone. You know what that means. I can't think of that movie and not think of that line. You've also got the rise of some of those movies that would wind up becoming Skinamax or HBO late night movies, Porky's and the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. On TV, you've got Cheers debuts, Knight Rider debuts, TJ Hooker, Matt Houston, which was my favorite TV show of all time.
Really?
I love Matt Houston. Remington Steele, Voyagers, another great TV show. And Late Night with David Letterman debuted in 1982.
I feel like you're missing, I'm sorry, but I feel like you're missing an important other television show that debuted in 82.
Okay, all right.
Bosom Buddies.
I missed Bosom Buddies, yes. But in 1982, David Letterman's first guest on Late Night with David Letterman was Bill Murray, and he danced around to the song Physical by Olivia Newton-John.
Did you see any clips of that? Did he have leg warmers on?
I'm going to have to see if I can find one, and if I can, I will share it.
All right.
In the sports world, the 49ers started their dynasty in 1982. It's their first Super Bowl and their first Super Bowl win. Montana wins the MVP. You've got NFL regular season strike happening in 1982 for the actual 1982 season. Whitey Herzog, Dean Smith, and Pat Riley all win their first championships in 1982. Whitey Herzog in baseball, Dean Smith in NCAA basketball, and Pat Riley in the NBA. Jimmy Connors wins Wimbledon and the U.S. Open at age 30, beating McEnroe and Lendl. Cal Ripken starts the first game of his 2,632 game streak in 1982. And on sad note, Ray Boom Boom Mancini fought and beat Duk Koo Kim, who died 5 days after the fight.
Yeesh.
And I remember that vividly, and it actually changed boxing rules dramatically after that fight happened. So that was something that was big at the time. In business, AT&T monopoly is broken up. Epcot is opened, and DeLorean stops producing cars. So it was a really interesting time and very different time than we are right now.
Yeah, and that translated into music as well. So we'll talk about the number one albums for the year. There were 10 distinct number one albums in 1982, which was when Thriller came out. Noteworthy is that Thriller is not among them. Now, granted, Thriller came out at the end of November, so maybe it just didn't have enough time. But, you would think, as huge as it was, you would kind of think that it would be number one hit within the first couple of weeks that it came out, but it wasn't. And I think we're going to get to a little bit more about that in something that you don't know. So the 10 number one albums for 1982 were For Those About to Rock, We Salute You by AC/DC, Foreigner 4, Freeze Frame by J. Giles Band, Beauty and the Beat by the Go-Go's, Chariots of Fire, Asia, which was the top selling album of the year, Tug of War with Paul McCartney, Mirage with Fleetwood Mac, American Fool with John Cougar, and Business as Usual with Men at Work. And, I just wanted to list all those out because when I look at that list, that's at least 6 of those albums I had in my initial collection.
And you didn't even mention 1999 by Prince, which came out in 1982 as well, or Nebraska by Springsteen, which is a great album as well. So a lot going on musically in 1982.
Yeah. So any other notables besides those 2 that you want to call out?
I would also say from the top 500 list, the Chuck Berry compilation album, The Great 28. If you haven't listened to it, it's an awesome intro to Chuck Berry. It's got his 28 best songs. It's an awesome album.
Okay. So then what else do we have? So we've got the single. So what was popular in top 40 radio at the time? So what's interesting is you mentioned the Bill Murray appearance on Letterman. The top song for the year was Physical by
Olivia
Newton-John. And if anyone remembers that time, it's incredible how pervasive the whole leg warmers and headbands and that whole aerobics culture was. Yeah, so Physical was the number 1 song. The number 2 song was Eye of the Tiger from Rocky 3.
I have a personal dislike for that song based upon some personal history that I choose to not get into, but I just don't like that song even a little bit.
That's a tease. Am I going to get the personal history offline? I got to know.
All right. So I was not doing spectacularly in school, and my mom gave me a poster on my wall of a tiger and said, "Eye of the Tiger." And like every time I hear it, I'm like, I effing hate that song.
So Physical and Eye of the Tiger were not only the top 2 songs of the year, but for the entire 80s, they were the 2 songs that were in the top 10 for the longest period of time. Both of them were in the top 10 for 15 consecutive weeks each. Not necessarily the exact same 15, but I think they there was some overlap. I think they came out right around the same time. So the 2 biggest songs of the 80s were those. And it just goes to show you that what's popular isn't necessarily what's lasting, because I don't know anyone who cares to hear either of those songs. And yet that same year, 1982, some of the most enduring classic songs came out. You can't go anywhere without starting with Don't Stop Believin'. That song has, as big as it was in 82, it's certainly bigger now in pop culture than it was back then.
Yep.
Then you've got some other 80s classics. You've got Jenny, 8675309, Don't You Want Me, Tainted Love, I Ran, So Far Away by A Flock of Seagulls, Working for the Weekend. Does a Friday ever come around without you hearing that song? And then who could forget our buddy Stevie with Edge of 17 and Leather and Lace.
There you go.
So that's the musical landscape. Bill, do you want to expound a little bit on your personal history?
My history with Michael Jackson really goes back to TV. And it starts with the Motown 25-year special, Yesterday, Today, and Forever. And I remember vividly seeing Michael Jackson perform on that special, doing Billie Jean. That's the one where he did the moonwalk first on television. And it was like my head exploded, and the whole world's head exploded. Like everybody wanted to moonwalk. Everybody wanted to know how to do the moonwalk. And oh my God, how did this guy do this? And then you cut to late in the year in '83 when the Thriller video is released on MTV, and everybody was sitting in front of their TV waiting for this video. It was announced, it was promoted, everybody knew it was coming. It was this special 14-minute long video, and it was a big thing. I remember exactly sitting on my couch, like I almost remember what I was wearing. Like it was that vivid of a memory. So for me, Michael Jackson and that Thriller album specifically is right at the heart of my, preteen years going on to becoming a teenager. And it really means a lot to me because it connects a lot with my life experience. So that album and Michael Jackson, it was really a key part of my life at the time and really me growing up as a teenager.
I think I get what you're saying, but I'll tell you, I don't have the same reaction. It's definitely one of those things where it puts me in a particular place and time, but it wasn't something that stayed with me. Like, I had the album, I had it on vinyl, I listened to the songs, I watched the videos, and that was great at the time. And a year later, I was done with it. As a matter of fact, until I started listening to this album in preparation of the show, I don't know if I've heard this album in 30 years. I mean, it's just something that is not meaningful for me.
Different perspectives. That's what makes the world go round, right? So.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us to some facts about the album. So it was released, like we said, on November 30th of 1982. It was recorded from April 14th through November 8th of 82 in LA, and it was produced by Michael and Quincy Jones. There's a total of 9 tracks, and the total running time is just a hair over 42 minutes. So, once again, just keeping under that 44-minute mark for the 2 sides of a vinyl record. So those are some of the details about the album. And then you've also got that cover art. Now, it was never anything that was particularly noteworthy to me, but they must have been doing something right, because when I was talking to Ellie, my 13-year-old daughter, about the next show, she goes, "Is that the one where he has the white suit?" So somehow or another, that image
it's iconic.
Has been burned on her brain. Yeah. And something I just learned preparing today was that white suit wasn't even Michael's. It belonged to the photographer. How weird is that?
That's odd, yeah.
Yeah. So, the photographer was a gentleman named Dick Zimmerman, and that was Zimmerman's white suit that Michael is wearing on the cover of Thriller.
Just his cool guy vibe in a white suit, just chilling.
Yep. All right. So what can you tell us about Michael and his background?
All right. So let's just lay the groundwork for leading up to Thriller. So Michael Jackson, born August 29th, 1958, Gary, Indiana. He's the 8th child of the Jackson family. He made his professional debut in music in 1964 with his older brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Marlon, as a member of the Jackson 5. Have you heard of them? Jermaine was supposed to be the lead singer. Okay. So his father was not, his father was really hard on Michael, and Jermaine was supposed to be the lead singer. Joe Jackson, the father, thought Jermaine had the talent, not Michael. And it just became really obvious that Michael was just absolutely the lead singer. And he kind of got forced into letting Michael be the lead singer. So Michael became the lead singer, not through anything other than the fact that he was just ridiculously talented. In 1966, they won a competition where they covered the Temptations. A year later, they won the talent night at the Apollo Theater, and Gladys Knight saw them. And between Gladys Knight, Bobby Taylor from another band, and Diana Ross, they all kind of had a role in putting them in front of Motown, and Berry Gordy ultimately said, "I got to sign this group. This group is phenomenal." So they sign with Motown Records, and Motown decides to promote them by effectively launching their career through Diana Ross. So they joined Diana Ross in a show in LA in 1969, and then their first album is Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5, which is just kind of odd. It goes back to the who's Fleetwood Mac?
Oh yeah, presented by
right?
Rick so-and-so or something.
Yeah. So it's just kind of odd. So they tried to propagate this myth that Diana Ross found them and whatnot, which really was just marketing. So they were the first act to have their first 4 singles, I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There, reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. They had 17 top 40 singles. And over the course of them career-wise, Michael and a few of the brothers started to do solo stuff. So in the early 70s, Michael started to do solo stuff, but they were still very much a band. But the Jackson 5 really started waning success-wise in like the mid to late 70s. Around 76, they were struggling, and they decided to leave Motown Records, and they went to CBS Epic. Everyone except for Jermaine, who stayed with Motown. So when they went to CBS Epic, they actually had to change their name kind of like a few other artists we've heard about. Like Prince had to change his name to a symbol because he wanted to have creative control. They changed their names to the Jacksons, and Randy Jackson replaced Jermaine. And the Jacksons were obviously still very much largely the same group, but they couldn't use the name the Jackson 5 because Motown owned it. So over the course of that period of time in the 70s, they were everywhere. They had a Saturday morning cartoon show as the Jackson 5. When they went to CBS Epic, CBS had the Jacksons variety show on CBS television where it had everybody except for Jermaine. It even had LaToya and Janet on it. So it wasn't a very long-lasting show, but it just shows you how pervasive the Jacksons were in that period of time. So cut to Michael trying to start his own thing on a solo career-wise, and he's putting out albums. 72 was his first solo album, Gotta Be There. Wasn't very successful. It was a lot of covers. His first real success as a solo came with the album Ben and with the song titled Ben from the movie. And he really didn't have much success solo-wise until Off the Wall in 1979. And that really started right after he did the movie The Wiz with Diana Ross, Nipsey Russell, and Ted Ross. So that movie, that 1977 movie, really springboarded him again into the public's eye. Even though the movie wasn't a huge success, it did have visibility. And that Off the Wall album, working with Quincy Jones, was really his start, but it wasn't him leaping into the upper stratosphere. It wasn't him being a superstar. It was him having some success.
Yeah, so he's still not Michael Jackson, the icon at this time.
He's not. He's got a couple of hits off that Off the Wall album, which is a great album, but it's not Michael Jackson that we know as this, name that everybody in the world knows.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about like looking at the discography and the bio, and I feel like Off the Wall is almost a comeback story.
It really is. If you look at his solo albums, he wasn't going anywhere. I mean, the Jacksons, there were a couple of good songs on, Destiny and Triumph, but they weren't really going anywhere. Off the Wall was him really starting to become successful, and it really planted a flag in the ground and said, hey, I'm somebody who has a chance to become somebody bigger as a solo artist. So
okay, so does that about wrap up what you wanted to tell us about Michael?
It does, Tone, and I think it sets you up to talk about where Michael was as far as success and whatnot going into the Thriller album. And I know we're going to move into our Something You Might Not Know section, and I think
it's a perfect segue because the other thing that was happening in the late 70s, at this time when we're talking about the Jacksons' popularity starting to wane and Michael struggling to make a go of it as a solo artist. And this is disco, and then the subsequent death of disco and the backlash to disco. So as we get into the late 70s and then move into the 80s, huge backlash against disco. People were just sick of it. And, you could say what you want about the reasons. I mean, it's hard to say that it was completely bad considering how popular it was and some of the classic music by artists, both black and white, that came out of that time as far as the disco era goes. Nobody seems to be harping on John Travolta and the Bee Gees, and yet somehow or another, disco became synonymous with black music, urban music, R&B music.
It's really interesting because disco is probably the one genre in my lifetime where I've, at least my perspective, where I've seen that the culture just completely revolted against it and like nobody wanted anything to do with it. And it was almost like, oh my God, how did we ever like this? Right. So it's just really interesting how that happened.
Exactly. So now we get to 1982, and as this is happening, there just was a complete schism between black music and white music, to the point where in 1982, there were only 2 songs that even made it into the top 3 on pop radio. And those 2 songs were Truly by Lionel Richie and then Ebony and Ivory by Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. 2 songs featuring black artists that made the top 3 for the entire year. And if you consider that Paul McCartney is who he is, it's really kind of only 1 song, right? So it's so strange for you and I, we were just kids then.
Yep.
We didn't know any better. We didn't listen. We weren't listening to that much radio prior to this time. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even listening to that much radio. I was listening more, MTV, because MTV launched in
It was more
August of '81.
100%. MTV was everything at the time. Yeah.
So that's, where you and I apparently, and I'm sure a lot of other people our age, really got their music from. It wasn't from the radio, it was from MTV. So we don't know any better. All we really know is because we start watching right around that time, and then Michael Jackson comes out around that time, and then he breaks what was clearly a color barrier that we just didn't know existed, because we were there right when it broke.
And I saw this really cool video that I didn't even know existed, of an interview with one of the MTV VJs interviewing David Bowie. And David Bowie asks him the uncomfortable question of, how come MTV doesn't play black artists? And it was just a lot of hem, haw, we're playing to what the country in the Midwest wants to hear, and Bowie just calls him out on it, and it's really awesome. It's a great interview, and Bowie was awesome.
So at this time, Michael Jackson isn't on MTV. You know why? Because nobody who's black is on MTV. Literally nobody except and I forget the name of the group, but they had a novelty song called "Pass the Dutchie," and they played it's like a reggae song. And
I remember it well. Yep.
But it was all a bunch of kids, so it was kids singing, so it was kind of a novelty song, and it wasn't in heavy rotation. So those were technically the first black artists on MTV, but besides them, nobody else, including Michael Jackson, was on MTV. And when Thriller came out and the Billie Jean video was created, it wasn't on MTV. It only came on MTV once the song became just too big of a hit that they couldn't resist it, and they had to put it on MTV.
Well, the other thing that I read, Tone, is that the president of CBS threatened to pull all of his music from MTV unless they played the video.
That's right.
So he basically put his weight behind Michael Jackson and said, look, you need to start playing his music, his videos on this channel. And they had to cave.
Yep. And still, that wasn't even enough to get pop radio in New York City. I mean, this isn't, Omaha. This is New York City. Pop radio still wouldn't play Michael Jackson.
Which contextually, we were so young, I had no idea. I really didn't listen to PLJ. After that I know PLJ very well, as you do, right? Mm-hmm. It's a huge radio station, that was huge during the time pre-Sirius XM and all of that, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that was going on. I had no concept of it.
Yeah. So they only finally relented, and they didn't do Billie Jean, at least initially, but they relented and played Beat It because Eddie Van Halen played the guitar solo on Beat It. And they said, okay, well, we can justify playing Michael Jackson because Eddie Van Halen has this guitar solo, and that's the cover that we're going to use to play freaking Michael Jackson.
Well, and they all basically lived and died with we're rock stations, so we have to play rock music.
Yeah, because Physical by Olivia Newton-John was really rocking out, guys. Seriously.
Such garbage.
Yeah. So finally, Beat It breaks through on pop radio, and then Billie Jean and Beat It break through on MTV. But here's the thing. So while CBS was forcing MTV to play the videos, and as much success as they were having with it, CBS didn't want to pay for a third video because they had a policy: we don't pay for more than 2 music videos. So Thriller wasn't paid for by the record company.
I think that leads into my something you might not know. Any other topics?
Nope, that's it.
All right, awesome. So you left me perfect spot, Tony. You took me right to Thriller. Exactly. All right, so my something really is all around Thriller, and specifically around the video. So as Tony mentioned, the Thriller video didn't have funding, so CBS didn't want to pay for it, and the budget that they had for the video that Michael Jackson wanted to do for the video was enormous. They wanted to spend almost $1 million on the video, and they had nowhere to get this money from. So Michael Jackson gets John Landis, and John Landis, famous director who directed a lot of movies. And at the time, his big movie was American Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets John Landis, and John Landis and Michael Jackson talk about it. And John Landis convinces Michael that here's how we're going to fund the movie. We're going to make a making of Michael Jackson's Thriller. So they do a whole documentary as they're doing the Thriller video, and they basically self-fund creating the video, which is just absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching Thriller. I remember watching the making of Thriller. The making of Thriller was almost as cool as Thriller. So it was really, really just an innovative way of thinking about it. So in the video Thriller, one of the things that I didn't know is when they come out of the movie theater, they're standing in front of a movie poster. And the movie poster is like a monster movie. And I never really noticed the title of the movie, but if you freeze it and you look at it, or you get an image of the picture, the name of the movie was Schlock, and it was a John Landis movie. It was actually a real John Landis movie, and that movie was a kind of jokey monster movie where John Landis worked with a few other very big names, one of which was John Chambers, another of which was Rick Baker. John Chambers was a huge name in makeup and in effects, and John Chambers was one of the actors in that movie. So it was like it was the only movie he ever acted in. So he's on this billboard behind him. John Chambers was the only movie he ever acted in. John Chambers is the guy who did the special effects stuff that the CIA used to pull off the Iran hostage crisis thing. He's the guy who was the behind the whole Argo movie thing. Like that's John Chambers. And he's also the guy who invented Spock's ears. Like that's John Chambers. Wow. So that's him, and he's part of that Schlock movie. On top of that, you've got Rick Baker and John Landis, who really were just enamored and just huge John Chambers fans. So they decide to start spreading a rumor that John Chambers was behind the Patterson-Gimlin film. Are you familiar with the Patterson-Gimlin film, Tony?
Not in the least.
So the Patterson-Gimlin film is the Bigfoot footage. So if you YouTube the Patterson film and that old grainy video of Bigfoot running through the woods that they still can't figure out or debunk or whatever, they put the rumor out there that it was John Chambers who did the video, which is not true whatsoever. Chambers like, that wasn't me. Like they were just trying to build him up. So you've got that. Rick Baker is hot off working on American Werewolf in London. Rick Baker does all of the makeup and special effects for the Thriller video. So Rick Baker would win the very first Academy Award for makeup for American Werewolf in London. So that was in 1981 when the movie was done. It was the first year that they had that in the Academy Awards. He won the very first Academy Award for it.
Cool.
So they decide that they want to have Michael be a monster, but they don't want him to be a werewolf. They've done the werewolf thing. They don't want it to be a werewolf. So what they make him look more like is a cat. So they try to make him look kind of cat-like, which when he grows the whiskers and whatnot, and the prosthetics that they do, they try to go after a cat-like look. So Rick Baker is incredibly prolific in and of himself. So Rick Baker worked on Star Wars. He worked on American Werewolf in London. He worked on Harry and the Hendersons. He's the guy who created that Harry and the Hendersons character. He worked on Coming to America. He did all of the special makeups effects in Coming to America, one of my favorite movies of all time. He worked on The Nutty Professor, did the special effects on that. Men in Black, The Ring, Hellboy. So this guy is just this incredibly prolific makeup artist. So Michael Jackson's got John Landis, who's this superstar director. He's got Rick Baker, who's this superstar makeup artist. He goes and adds a woman by the name of Deborah Nadelman, who does costumes. She was the costume designer for the Thriller video. She was also the costume designer for Raiders of the Lost Ark. The choreographer for the video, Michael Peters, won a Tony for his work on Dreamgirls. He also choreographed the dance sequences in Pat Benatar's Love is a Battlefield and the Beat It video. And he was one of the dancers in the Beat It video with the mustache and the knife fight. Okay. So he's in that. A little bit more around the video. You've got original casting for the female lead in the Thriller video was supposed to be Jennifer Beals, but they couldn't get her to do it, so they ultimately went with Ola Ray, and she was actually a Playboy Playmate, and that's how she kind of got seen and got cast. On the set, as all of this stuff is going on, and you've got this amazing crew of people working, Marlon Brando's showing up, Rock Hudson's showing up, Jackie O is showing up, and Fred Astaire is showing up, and they almost convinced Fred Astaire to perform in the video, which would have been just ridiculous.
Yeah, and as I recall, Astaire was showing up because he was a big admirer of Michael's dancing.
They were huge fans of each other, so yeah. Absolutely. And then the last piece I would mention is, if you watch the video at the very beginning, you notice there's a section where they do like almost a disclaimer, and it actually kind of gave the video some heat to it, like, oh my goodness, this is something. Oh my goodness, they're saying they're disclaiming it. Well, the disclaimer came because Michael was a Jehovah's Witness, and he felt like he had to put the disclaimer on it, otherwise it would be, oh my God, this is just terrible for my faith. So you've got all of these things coming together to make this Thriller video, and I just think it's really cool.
All right.
And I have one little slight bonus if you're interested.
Oh, of course.
All right. So we've talked over the season about artists being sued and artists having inspirations from others. Mm-hmm. So what would it be if we didn't have inspiration on this album, right? So there's a few places where Michael Jackson took inspiration on this album. None of them more so than in the song "Wanna Be Starting Something." Michael straight admitted that he borrowed the lyrics from the 1972 single "Soul Makasa" by a Cameroon saxophonist named Manu Dibango. And I didn't know that I knew the song, but when I actually listened to the song, I know the song. I've heard it. I've heard it a lot. It's a known, it's a good song. It's well known. And the lyrics in that song are "Mamako, Mamasa, Mako, Mako sa." And Michael changed it to "Mamase, Mamasa, Mamaku sa." Manu Dibango sued Michael Jackson. They settled out of court. Not the end of story, though, because in 2007, Rihanna sampled Michael in her song "Don't Stop the Music." So she went to Michael and she cleared sampling "Wanna Be Started Something" with Michael. Uh-huh. And Michael said, "Oh, sure, you can play it, absolutely." She didn't clear it with Manu Dibango. so he went after her, and ultimately it was thrown out because she actually gave credit on the album, so it was thrown out.
Okay. Well, I was actually going to talk about that when we got to the tracks. So
all right. Sorry.
So maybe that just, I think that's the next segment anyway. So why don't we just start us off there with "Wanna Be Starting Something"? You gave us the bit on the Manu Dibango of it all. As far as the song itself goes, I got to say that, and I want to shout out my buddy Tommy Daps, who texted me as he was doing his show prep. I'm so happy that people are actually listening to the albums before the shows, as we suggested a couple of episodes ago. So Tommy Daps texts me and he says, "Is there anyone less intimidating than Michael Jackson to be asking, wanna be starting something?"
And the only thing that's better is the fact that the whole premise of the song "Bad" on the album, and I know this is a Thriller podcast, but the whole premise of the song "Bad" was it was intended to be a duet between Michael Jackson and Prince. Michael Jackson wrote the song, and he intended it to be a duet between Michael Jackson and Prince. And Prince said, "I am not singing 'Your Butt Is Mine,' and you're not singing it to me, so I'm not doing that song with you."
And thus started the feud.
Well, the feud started on another topic, but maybe we can get to that in a little bit.
All right. So really the song is about, it's an attack on tabloid journalism, and I didn't know this until researching it, but that explains that whole "you're a vegetable" line, which I never understood. I was like, what the heck is he talking about? And the line is, "They eat off of you, you're a vegetable." And what he's talking about there is just being cannibalized by the tabloids.
it definitely puts it in better context
Yeah.
because that was not, as a younger person listening to that song, I had zero context of what the heck he was talking about there.
Yeah, and not only that, it kind of took me out of the song a little bit because it sounded nonsensical. Also, the song references, there's a line, obviously we're going to get to Billie Jean, but he references Billie Jean in this song too. There's a line that, or a verse that says, Billie Jean is always talking when nobody else is talking, telling lies and rubbing shoulders, so they called her mouth a motor. So Billie Jean is a real person, and Billie Jean accused Michael of fathering a child, which, we get to in the Billie Jean song. So this was something that was really real for Michael.
And Quincy didn't even want him to name the song Billie Jean because of that. And he didn't want Billie Jean's name in this song because of that. So, she was a real person. So, and for me, this song is post-disco. So it's very much still disco-ish feeling, but it's that next step post disco, and it's a great song.
Yeah, and it's got a great beat and great overlapping drum lines. It's a very good song. All right, so what's next?
Baby Be Mine.
Thoughts?
I think Baby Be Mine is an underrated track on this album. I think it could have been released as a single. It wasn't. I'm not sure why it wasn't. I think it could have been successful, especially at the time. Like I listened to it, I'm like, it's a good song. It's not anything that stands out enormously, because I haven't heard it a million times. But I think it could have been released as a single.
For me, Baby Be Mine, I feel the same way. Where on first blush, I was like, well, this is definitely one of my least favorite songs on the album, and it still is. But that in a 9-song album where you've got a bunch of, top 10 hits, being number 8 isn't the worst thing in the world. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's all right. Not bad.
Yep. I like the song because I haven't heard it a million times. It isn't something I'll remember greatly after time. This will kind of slip away as, the rest of the songs I've heard a million times and they'll stick with me.
Okay. So what's the next track?
The Girl Is Mine. The doggone girl is mine.
The doggone girl is mine. Oh, well, you're really serious.
Supposedly McCartney had such a problem with doggone, and he's like, I am not singing that.
Well, to be honest, considering the incredible lyrics that Paul has written over the years, I don't know how he sang any of this schlock.
Schlock is the right word. Yes,
this is schlock. You'll see in the show notes that I put in. My favorite part of this song is also the worst part of this song. It's so bad that it's good, and it's the spoken dialogue between Paul and Michael,
back and forth. Oh, it's priceless.
So,
yeah,
we can leave it, we can cut it, but I'm gonna ask you. I put the dialogue in here, and let's do it. You be Paul, and I'll be Michael.
All right, give me a second. Let me get to it. All right, Michael. We're not going to fight about this, okay?
Paul, I think I told you I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I've heard it all before, Michael. She told me that I'm her forever lover. Don't you remember?
Well, after loving me, she said she couldn't love another.
Is that what she said?
Yes, she said it. You keep dreaming. I mean,
priceless. Absolutely priceless.
How could Sir Paul agree to record this? I mean... Oh my God, this is terrible. So what's worse, the doggone girl is mine or this? I mean, it's all bad.
So
right?
Like this is so bad it's funny.
Yeah.
The doggone girl is bad. The doggone girl is mine is awful. Like I just every time I hear it, I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. Like I just the song is so corny.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I've got to say about The Girl Is Mine.
All right, next up, last track on side 1 is the title track, Thriller.
So, I struggle with this one. I don't know. Do I like this song, or is it just that the video is so iconic? I can't quite tell.
So I would say that personally, I like the song, but it's hard to separate it from the video. Mm-hmm. It truly is hard to separate it from the video because the imagery just jumps to mind. Like when I hear the song, I see the video because I've seen it so many times. I've heard the song so many times, but the two really go hand in hand for me. It's almost like a movie where you can hear a line and you can see what's going on in the movie. Like it's very much that for me.
Yeah. So similar. So I don't know how much I like the song, but I like the cumulative experience, the multimedia experience of it.
Well, and when the song was written by Rod Temperton, who wrote three of the songs on the album. And Rod Temperton was an incredibly prolific songwriter to begin with. He actually wrote a lot of songs that you would have heard of: Boogie Nights, Always and Forever. He wrote Rock With You for Michael Jackson, Off the Wall for Michael Jackson. He wrote Gimme the Night for George Benson. He wrote Yamo Be There for Michael McDonald and James Ingram. So he was a prolific songwriter. So he wrote Thriller, and when he wrote it, the title of the song was actually Starlight, and they were originally going to call the album Midnight Man, and they just didn't love the name of the album, and it came to them like thinking about it, one word, Thriller. And they reworked the song Starlight, and they just plugged the words in, and it became Thriller, and it worked. And I think the coolest part of the song, and I actually I love the Vincent Price part. I actually really love the extended cut that they didn't play with Vincent Price, where he actually has another couple of lines. Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah, and so speaking of the Vincent Price of it, it turns out that he was brought into the project not even by Michael, but through Quincy, but really Quincy via Peggy Lipton, who was Quincy's wife at the time. And she had a relationship with Price, and he agreed to do this. And he was offered a choice on how to get paid. Did you see this one?
I know how much he got paid, but I didn't know he was offered a choice.
He was offered a choice between a percentage of I don't know if it's the song or the album, but basically a back end cut on something related to this album, or what was it, like $2,000?
$1,000. He got paid $1,000.
He took $1,000 versus a cut of this album, which sold 70 million copies.
The most of all time. Yes.
So, Vincent Price, call your agent.
So that wraps up side one, and it's kind of interesting to have Thriller wrap up the side one with the imagery of what the song is, and kind of that it's the whole horror movie classic and whatnot. And the way the first album side comes together, you start off with the commentary about the media, and you end with the commentary on Thriller movies and whatnot. It's an interesting arc.
Yeah, and paranoia, and feeling like you're under attack, so there is a connection there. So where do we go for side two?
Side two starts out with the rock song, Beat It.
So speaking of compensation, everybody knows that Eddie Van Halen does the guitar solo here. And Bill, tell the fans what his compensation was.
I believe it was $0.
Oh, as far as dollars go, yeah. So the total package, the total compensation package was $0 and a 12-pack.
And a 12-pack, yes. Eddie, come over.
Yeah.
I'll pay you in beer.
Yeah. So think about it. So Vincent Price and Eddie Van Halen, who in and of themselves are enormous stars, they participated in the biggest album of all time and essentially got paid nothing. It's amazing. Yeah. So Beat It also, as with, you were saying with Thriller, I can't hear it without seeing it in my mind, seeing the video.
Well, and as I understand, the video had members of the Crips and the Bloods in it.
In this anti-gang violence song?
In this anti-gang violence song, yes.
Did they know what they were doing?
I guess. I don't know.
So so maybe this will be a good time just to mention that, why I haven't liked this album it's just, you've heard the hits so many times growing up, and I just had no interest in hearing them again. And again, to be honest, I'm not going to after we're done here. I'm done with this. But I did appreciate hearing Eddie and his solo again, because it is pretty great.
It's a tremendous guitar solo, and I would not call this one of my favorite albums of all time, but it is. I do seriously consider it one of the best albums of all time, and the tracks on it stand up well in my mind in what they are. So, and Beat It is kind of a genre crossing pop rock ish song, and I think it stands up really
Yeah.
well with
Well,
that.
and it was, as we were talking about before, it was crucial to getting it on pop radio. What I love about how the solo came together was Eddie shows up to record and he asks Quincy, what do you want me to do? Like give me some parameters. And Quincy basically says, I brought you in here to do what you do. You do whatever, we'll make it work. And gosh, they sure did.
Yep.
All right, what's next?
So second track, side 2, is probably the biggest hit on the album, Billie Jean. It is the first single that was a huge success. It's the starting of the moonwalk with the pop culture reference. Tremendous song. And you hear the lyrics of the song, it really comes across as a hurt Michael Jackson. Like he's really telling what seems to be a very personal story in this song. And it comes across, it feels real.
And talking about the impact of videos again, this is another one where I don't hear it without, seeing
100%.
Seeing the bricks lighting up as he's walking along, and it's just such, and the dancing in the video, it's like my first exposure to dancing like that.
100%, yeah. And that video really kind of started the whole chain of all of this. So
yeah, and you're going back to what you were talking about, the album being, not necessarily a favorite, but a best. And when we're talking about all that context, you can't overstate how impactful this album is. It basically changed everything that we experience today in pop music is because of this album.
It is the 80s Sgt. Pepper's. That's how I look at it. It did almost as much for music as Sgt. Pepper's did in my mind. And that's for me why it's in my best albums list, because it has impacted popular music from the point where it was released
absolutely
till today.
Yep. Okay, what's next?
Human Nature. And this one's interesting. So this is one of the ones that Michael didn't write. So some of the performing artists
the studio
on the
musicians.
album, he actually had several members of the band Toto performing on this album, and they gave Quincy a tape with a few songs that they thought might be good for the album. And Quincy listened to the tape, and he didn't like the songs that he had. But at the end of the tape, there was a little snippet of something that he just left there, and he said, "What about this one?" And
Jeff Porcaro,
guys from the band, Steve Porcaro, basically had to cobble it together and put it together, and it wound up becoming Human Nature.
Just to add on to that story, so the band was recording tracks and stuff to present to Quincy for this, but they were reusing tape. So
right. it was a leftover piece.
It wasn't something they accidentally, that they put in there.
Yeah, they didn't intend to send.
Yeah, it was just supposed to. Yes. It was just already there because they were recording over it. So when they were done with the things that they were sending to Quincy, then they cut, and then you've got this leftover music, and that's the stuff that Quincy liked. So that's how we got Human Nature.
It's a pretty cool way for a song to come about. And it's a good song. It's a really good song.
All right. And are we almost done? Is that 7? So what's number 8? PYT?
We got PYT, which is written by James Ingram and Quincy Jones. And this is one of the songs that kind of jumps out at me off this album as a song that I actually didn't originally remember that it was on this album. And I'm like, wow, that was on this album too? Holy cow, that's why this album was so freaking huge. Just a great song.
Yeah, I like this song too. And when I think about the songs on this album and I think about Michael Jackson, they're actually kind of funny, right? I mean, you've got Baby Be Mine, The Girl Is Mine, Wanna Be Starting Something, Pretty Young Thing. I don't know. It's got a little creepy vibe to it. And maybe it is kind of Michael, but it's good. PYT is just a great song. There's nothing to say because it's not like anything incredible. It's just a great song. All right, so now we get to number 9, Lady in My Life.
Probably my least favorite track on the album. It doesn't stand out for me at all. And if I never hear it again, it would be too soon.
It's almost a shame. It's almost a shame that it's on here. Yeah.
Should have been an 8-track. Should have been an 8-track album. I think we've said this a few times with albums. Like you don't need to use the full time.
So so then we won't waste any more time talking about it. That's it for the track list. So what's the next segment? Is this where we wrap up the song poll?
This is where we close the song draft from the prior week, and we do our song draft for this week. And I know you're excited about this song draft this week because, well, let's close it and we'll talk about it. So I am officially closing the polls. We are no longer accepting votes, Tone. And would you like to guess how it went this past week?
I'm so scarred from all the abuse that I've taken in these past drafts that I don't want to guess. I feel like there's only one answer, but I definitely could be wrong. So tell me, give me the bad news.
So Tony, you won going away this week. It wasn't close. You won going away.
Well, that's a relief because if I didn't win this week, then there's no hope for me.
I think what it came down to, especially in talking to a few people who listen to the podcast, I think what it came down to is the down album selections. Where once we got to track 5, so the first 4 tracks, I think you could kind of go a few different ways. Where you picked Thunder Road and Born to Run, I took Jungle Land and Backstreets. Those 4 songs.
Those are clearly the
you can argue which ones you like better, which ones are better.
Yeah.
They're all phenomenal songs. But you go down album, and I think that's where you won this.
So essentially, 10th Avenue Freeze Out is better.
Then she's the one. 10th Avenue Freeze Out is what won it for you in my mind. Yes.
All right. Well, good. So I won. I'm happy. So am I 2 and 5? Is that the standings now?
You are 2 and that was episode 8. So you're
2 and 6.
2 and 6. Tony.
Well, I'm gonna start a streak here, and this will be a 2 match winning streak. Here we go.
All right. Well, since Tony selected Thriller, that means I get first selection this week, and I am going to select with the first selection in this week's song draft. At pick 1, Bill will select Billie Jean.
Billie Jean, good pick. So, I mentioned that last week I also did, or last show, I did a mock draft, and I
feel
and
like
your
the mock draft
helped me. So I called on some dear friends of ours, the Schwartz family. John and Trisha in Texas were very kind and participated in a mock draft with me. And I feel like I've got some really good intel here. But, being the contrarian, they told me what I should take in this spot, and I'm not going to follow their lead. So sorry, Schwartzes. I'm taking Beat It with my first pick.
All right. With the third pick, I'm going to take what I think is probably actually my favorite song on the album. Wanna Be Starting
That was Colleen's favorite. Oh, now I'm stuck. You've got me again where I'm a little confused. So I'm going to go PYT against my better judgment because I just flat out like PYT better. And I'll just see what you do here.
This is hard. I know what Lexi's telling me to do because I did chat with her about it, her and Shannon, and Chris gave me her thoughts as well. So I know what they would tell me to take.
So wait a minute. So you did a mock draft too?
I didn't. I did not do a mock draft. We went through the songs and kind of like talked about what we think the order of the songs is.
All right.
So let's see. I'm going to have to go with Thriller, Tone.
Wow. So you wanted to go somewhere else, huh?
Well, I was instructed to go somewhere else, but I'm going to go with Thriller.
So John and Trisha told me to go Thriller number 1. So the fact that you got it all the way down at number 5 is a win for you, at least probably in their eyes. Yeah, I'm torn. The right answer is Human Nature here. So I think I'm going to do that.
Yep, that's what I was torn with. That was the one I was going to take. So that's what Lexi told me to take.
Well,
but I didn't
goddaughter is very smart. Thank you, Lexi.
I am going to go with the corny as hell. The Girl Is Mine, and I'm going to love having that cheese sandwich on my team.
I secretly really wanted this one because the more I think, I'm smiling just thinking about that awful dialogue and just, oh God.
Oh, it's great. It's so great.
And
it's so
Paul
great.
He just has to know how terrible it was. I mean, gosh.
But he sings it with a big smile on his face.
Yeah,
Paul's just
Paul
the best.
Probably got paid. Oh, And speaking of feuds, right? I mean, we didn't even touch on Michael buying the Apple Music, the Beatles music catalog.
Oh, they stopped. They
Yeah.
stopped talking. Yeah, that was, they
Yeah.
did say, and they never talked again.
Well, I
Basically,
might be a lover and not a fighter, but I'm not going to stop from buying your music catalog. Uh,
it might have been worth it to do this album just to have you do a Michael Jackson voice. That
so I'm going to go Baby Be Mine. Underrated, pretty
That's-
decent song.
that's the right pick. Yeah, that's the right pick. And that leaves me the last song on the album at number 9.
Lady.
The lady in my
It's,
life.
it's not good. It's not good. It's not just the least good song on the album. It's a not good song.
So Tony, if you were to tell me coming into the draft that I could have gotten Wanna Be Starting Something and Thriller on top of getting my number 1 Billie Jean, I would have told you were crazy. There's no way I was getting that. So I am very, very, very happy with my song
Yeah.
draft this week. So
I
so to kind of put a summary on where we
Yeah.
are, and then we can chat about it for a minute. At number 1, Billie Jean. At number 3, Wanna Be Starting Something. At number 5, Thriller. At number 7, The Girl Is Mine. And at number 9, The Lady in My Life. Make up Team Bill.
Team Tony is Beat It at number 1. PYT is number 2. My third is Human Nature, and my fourth is Baby Be Mine.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't listen and pick
Yeah.
Thriller.
I think I did this for a prior. No, I know I did this in a prior show where I wrote down my rankings before the show, and I'm staring at my rankings, and I had Thriller number 2, so I had a chance to have my number 1 and number 2, and I didn't. I went with PYT instead, and I'm probably going to live to regret it. All right.
All right. Well, we will put it out there and let the fans decide. So that closes out our song draft for this week.
All right.
Tone, I think that takes us to final thoughts on the album.
So I'll start and just, I guess I said this a couple of times, so I'll be brief here. Iconic album, great videos, incredibly important to music as we know it today. And just, this is the last time I'm going to listen to this for, possibly the rest of my life. So thank you for, I guess, giving me an opportunity to revisit this. And I'm going to say thank you, Michael, and goodbye, Thriller.
Tony, for me, this album really impacted me in like the prime of me growing up. So I look at what the album was, how big it was in media. We didn't have social media at the time. We had TV and videos. And I look at how big and all-consuming it was at the time. It was incredibly impactful then. And then I look at what it actually has done for popular music over the past 40 years now, basically. It has been one of the most impactful albums, like we were talking about before. So that's why I put it as one of my best albums. Is it one of my favorites? No, I don't think it is. But it does have a few songs on it that I think are just special. And, it's something that I will not change the station whenever I hear one of those songs. So I don't know that I'm going to go back to listening to this album end to end anytime soon, but I will enjoy it when tracks from this album come on, and they'll always make me smile. They'll always make me think of a time in my life when I was younger and maybe a little bit more innocent and could not understand everything that was going on in the world. And I really, really, really think this album's had a tremendous impact on both me personally and in music over the past 40 years. So that is why I rank it my number 13 album of all time.
Number 13, not bad.
So Tone, I think that probably closes up all of the stuff that we have on Michael Jackson this week.
All right, so that wraps up this episode. So thank you for listening to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. Our next episode is going to feature what album, Bill?
So Tony, the next episode is going to feature the album that I've listened to the most in my lifetime. Okay.
Really?
I have listened to this album the most of any album I have ever listened to. Start to finish, I've probably listened to this album over 100 times easily in my life. And in the 90s, I listened to it nonstop. Even currently, I listen to it a lot. It's probably the album I've listened to the most in my life.
Huh.
Nirvana's
I never would have guessed that.
Nevermind. Absolutely love Nirvana. Absolutely love the album, and can't wait to talk about it next week.
All right, well, this should be a treat. I can't wait.
Get your grunge on. Get ready to have some fun. Go to Seattle, and we're going to listen to some awesome rock music this week.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. All right, wait, Tone. I think I've got a little bit more for us here. Let's talk a little bit about Prince and Michael Jackson and their rivalry.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, so the whole starting point of the feud between Michael Jackson and Prince was this event that happened where Prince was nobody at the time. Okay, he basically had just had the 1999 album Purple Rain hadn't been out yet. You know, he had a couple of songs that were radio hits. He was the up and coming cool guy, but like nobody knew who he was. So James Brown is doing this concert, and it just so happens that Michael Jackson and Prince are both there. So James Brown gets a tip from somebody that Michael Jackson's in the audience, and he calls him up. And Michael Jackson comes up on stage, and James Brown's like, you got to sing something. You got to do something. So he gives him the microphone, and Michael Jackson just proceeds to sing, I love you, I love you, I love you, a million different ways, and then does a slick Michael Jackson dance and James Brown dance, and gives him the thing back. And you think that's it. And then he leans over to James Brown and he whispers something in his ear. Well, what I've read is that he said to James Brown, there's a guy named Prince in the audience, and you need to call him up on stage. James Brown's like, who? He had no idea who Prince was at the time, didn't really know his music, didn't know his stuff. So he's like, all right, Michael wants me to call him up. I'm going to call him up. So he calls Prince up on stage. Prince comes up on stage, and it is like classic 80s Prince. He's got the hair. He's got the ruffled shirt. It is like classic 80s Prince. And you've got classic 80s Michael in his military, Sergeant Peppery regalia and whatnot. So you've got classic 80s Prince, classic 80s Michael, and they're both on stage with James Brown. And James Brown's like, oh, you got to do something. You got to play something. You got to do something because Michael said you got to come up here. So he gets handed a guitar. Now I've heard that the guitar was actually strung lefty. So he gets handed this guitar, and he starts. And Prince is just like a ridiculous guitarist. So he starts playing, and it's nothing spectacular. It just kind of sounds odd. And the explanation that the guitar was strung lefty actually makes more sense to me, because like when you hear the playing, it's just strange. So he plays for a few seconds, and then he gets down, and he's grinding with the guitar, and he's like doing all this like odd stuff with the guitar. And he gets up and he rips his shirt off, and he's strutting around stage with no shirt on. And then he decides to just walk off stage. And James Brown's set had this like lamppost thing that wasn't really a lamppost. And Prince decides to like try to swing down off of it. And he takes the lamppost down. And Michael Jackson is giggling his freaking head off. And he got such a kick out of Prince making a fool of himself that Prince was angry about it forever, and Michael loved it forever. And so that was kind of the start of it. And then there was the ping pong match that subsequently happened as well. That was kind of interesting.
Phenomenal.
Did you hear about the ping pong match?
No.
Okay. All right. So ping pong match. So this is post Purple Rain and whatnot. Prince was angry about this whole thing with James Brown. And this is like floating around forever. And like, oh my God, he made a fool of me and whatnot. So and Quincy Jones, there's an interview with Quincy Jones where Quincy said that Prince was so angry after the James Brown incident that he sat in his limo outside of the LA Forum and waited for Michael to come out, and he was going to run him over. Like Quincy Jones said Prince was going to run Michael Jackson over. Okay. So cut to a few years later, and it's the set of, I think it was Under the Cherry Moon Prince was recording, and Michael just happens to stop by. Michael was recording Captain EO or whatever, and he comes by, and Prince is playing ping pong with one of his cast or crew or whatever on the set. And he says, Michael, you want to play ping pong? You ever play ping pong? And Michael, it's not like Mr. Athlete necessarily. And Michael's like, go ahead, do the Michael, say, sure, I'll play ping pong.
Sure, I'll play ping pong.
So picture Michael Jackson and Prince. Picture, if you will, Michael Jackson and Prince playing ping pong. So Prince is like, slamming the ball at Michael. You want me to spike it? You want me to spike it? And he's like hitting Michael left and right. Michael drops his paddle, covers his face, and Prince hits him in the crotch with the ball. And he proceeds to do a dance around like all happy, and Michael storms off.
Oh my God. We need to see a dramatic reenactment of that.
Well, we can do the dramatic reenactment on the pickleball court, Tone.
Well, I'm gonna have to recover from my pickleball injuries, which I still haven't recovered from.
So anyway, so the whole drama between the two of them, just two very different characters. You've got the guy who was the star from when he was 11 years old, who was kind of royalty the whole career wise. And then you got the guy who's the up and comer, who was Prince, who was who did it very differently. You got Michael who did the mainstream all the way, and Michael put out Thriller, and then when he came back with Bad, he went straight mainstream again, and he wanted bigger. Like, he did the biggest selling album of all time, and he went after it again with Bad, and he thought Bad was a horrible failure, and Bad was an incredibly successful album, but nothing was going to be as successful as Thriller.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Prince went a completely different direction. Prince he put out Purple Rain. He's like, okay, I put out the best album I am ever going to put out. I'm going to put out stuff that I want to put out. And he puts out this amazing string of artistic albums. And if you look at his impact on artists over the past 40 years, it's similar, because you've got a lot of artists who follow the Michael Jackson track, and you've got a lot of artists that follow the Prince track and how they do things. It's just a different approach.
I would, and I've thought about this for 10 seconds. I would argue that Michael's impact is more cultural and on the music landscape itself, whereas Prince's impact on music, like musicians wise, is much greater.
Definitely more impactful on musicians per se, yes. But as far as how they produced art, you have a very going after trying to get popular stuff versus I'm going to just put out the stuff that is important to me and impactful to me. Different approach.